Hello everyone, welcome to the Dyspraxic Parents live stream. I've got 4 guests with me today who are all parents themselves and all dyspraxics. I will allow them a few moments to introduce themselves, but before we jump in with those, I just want to say there are a number of topics that we will be discussing today, and each topic will appear on the screen just before we start each discussion. So if there is a topic that we discuss that you think might be a little bit too much for you to listen to, you can press the mute button and the topic title will change to the next one when we change to that topic. So hopefully with that covered, I will allow my guests to introduce themselves. So we'll start off with John.
Yes, hello, my name's John, as Crystal said, and I'm on here because I wrote a blog about being a dyspraxic parent, and I got some play online on Medium, and that's why I was invited. So I'm looking forward to letting you know how it is to deal with a 20-month-old in the pandemic, and a little bit of my experience before that happened as well. So thanks for having me.
So John was also in February's edition of Dyspraxia magazine, so you will have seen his writing piece in there as well. Danielle?
Hi, I'm coming to you all the way from Australia, so it's very early in the morning over here. My Instagram handle is She Who Wears Many Hats, because I am a mum, I am an educator, I am a student teacher, I do lots of different things, and most of all, I am dyspraxic and ADHD, so it's a lot of showcasing the things that we do in our family. I've got children all the way from 17 to a 1-year-old. So we've got a huge age difference. Things are very backwards in our house compared to other people, and we're all about neurodiversity culture in our house as well. And it permeates what I do for work. So hi, and welcome to our live stream.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mike?
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. How are you doing? So my name's Mike. I'm in my 40s. I basically live with my wife and my son, who just recently turned 8. So going up the ages. You may also know me also from the cardio workouts that I lead on the Thursday evening and the Sunday morning. And you can find out more about my free online cardio workouts, just by liking and following the Dyspraxic Cardio King Mike Facebook page. And yeah, thank you very much, and welcome to the stream. Nice to meet you all.
Wonderful. I don't know if you guys are able to type in the chat box that everyone else will see. Muskan's asked what your Instagram handle was, Danielle. And Mike, you might be able to pop in that link as well for the workouts. I highly recommend them. I've done them myself. And then last but definitely not least, we have Kasia.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me on here tonight. So my name is Kasia. I am a single mom who's dyspraxic, but also a mom to a 17-year-old who's been diagnosed pretty, I think, recently to have dyspraxia as well. So I kind of understand things like the different from the parent point of view of being dyspraxic and parenting a dyspraxic. And in my work, I am an independent social worker. So I've done a lot of work of different sort of things with parents, but I have to say that dyspraxia is something that I really got more kind of drawn to in the last couple of years, even though I was diagnosed, I think, 10 years ago. So I'm kind of more immersed in it. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining me on the live stream. It is a very scary thing to do, but here we are. So hopefully we've got a nice warm welcome from all of the people watching. So we'll start off with our first question, so I put some feelers out there for what kind of topics our viewers might want us to talk about. So here is the first topic on our list, which is managing expectations and fears pre-parenting. Oh, there's Danielle's Instagram handle. Ta-da! She who wears many hats. Okay, so managing expectations and fears pre-parenting. So I'm not a parent myself yet, and I know that as a dyspraxic, there is that kind of fear of what am I going to be like as a parent. who is dyspraxic, and am I going to be good enough? How would you express how that was for you before you were parents? Who would like to go first? I'll pick eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch you about it. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. John.
I was very nervous myself, mainly because my worst fear wasn't like dropping the baby or anything. Obviously, when you're dyspraxic, you're very clumsy. My worst fear was just around being organised. You know, like when you have a child, you need to organise another person, and children are just agents of chaos. So when you're trying to organise a child, and when you can barely organise yourself, that was like my main fear. Was like, oh, what if they're sick and I need to give them medicine, or what if we're out for the day and I leave something behind, and then my baby's going without. Like, what if I go out and I forget sun cream? That was my main fear, and it was actually one of the things I most struggled with when I first started as a parent. You know, I'd take him out and I'd be like, oh, I've left his hat in the house. I'd be like, well, I'm already on the bus, I'm away, and then I religiously now just have to like look in his bag, and I'm checklisting things, and if I'm giving him medicine, I'm narrating the whole time, like, yes, okay, I'm lifting the paracetamol, I'm opening the paracetamol, just that way I'm just like, yeah, this is definitely this medicine, and I'm not mixing it up with anything else, and it's a lot of mental energy, so it's very difficult, just the organisation thing. But I think I've eventually become better at it, and I'm doing okay. Obviously, I'm not sure if my partner agrees or not, but I can ask her, and I'll let you know in the chat maybe later on. But yeah, that was one of my biggest fears, just being organised enough to look after a baby.
Wonderful, Mike.
I think you come through so many hurdles every day, and I want to go back to what you said about the child-safe bottles. Could we just not? I totally get why they exist, but those things that I'm glad I have a husband, because much like Kasha, I was a single parent for a long time. And when you've got no one else to open those bottles in the middle of the night when you're trying to get a screaming, teething kid, the paracetamol and things like that, it makes it really hard. And I think going into parenting, being dyspraxic, we have a lot of shame around how we operate, and that's brought on from our, there's little comments that when you were younger about, oh, how are you ever going to X, Y, Z? And we've all heard that over and over, and it makes it very difficult for us to feel like we have faith in ourselves. And then on top of it, when, I know in the UK, your midwifery model is very similar to us in Australia. And when you go and you have your baby in the hospital, they just let you leave with this tiny thing with no operating manual, that you now, this tiny little thing that you could break, and you've got to take it home, and you sit there after birth, and 'cause all the education is out there about birth and pregnancy, but not what happens next. And I think that uncertainty for dyspraxic parents is a larger gap of skills than what it is for other neurotypical parents as well.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, just back on that point is I've not struggled too much with the child safe bottles, thankfully, but the amount of baby proofing you have to do is a lot, and that's one thing I think particularly challenging with, I'm having to install a safety gate. And installing a safety gate for someone like myself is extremely difficult, because it's very awkward. You need to get pressure on both sides, and you're working with multiple tools, and so you're trying to equalise the pressure on all sides, so the gate just kind of fixes in the frame of the door, and it's extremely difficult. It took me quite a long time, and I was thankfully Colin was out of the house at the time, but it took several hours, and I'm pretty sure based on the instructions it should have taken about half an hour. And I had to take several breaks because I was just at my wit's end. And but I got it done eventually.
As you go through and have more kids, your experience changes as well. So by my third child, when we were going shopping for the safety gates and things like that, I knew I needed to get one that had a flat lip, because if it had any raised lip on the floor, I was going to go arse over tit. That was just what was going to happen. There was no way that you could not trip over something like that you're walking through so frequently that you've got a gate up. So you get a little bit more cleverer as you go on how you go about things. So one of the things, I use cloth nappies. I have no coordination in my hands whatsoever, but I've got ones that snap into place, and that means that I only have to sit there once every 2 or 3 days snapping nappies together, instead of trying to hold this writhing crocodile and try and get a nappy on with a shifting cloth nappy as well. So there's just hacks that you learn through experience. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of parents, is that you have to take a leap of faith and you have to believe in yourself. And it's really hard in those early days, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But once you start getting into a rhythm, you start to find your feet and find the faith in yourself, and managing those expectations come back to that as well. The more you lower that expectation, the more you'll hit those expectations.
Yeah, the nappy thing was difficult for me. I refer to it as baby jitsu, because it feels as though you're trying to wrestle them into submission until you can put the nappy on. And you're like, yeah, come on. And it's very challenging. But
has anyone really mastered that?
maybe not. But
I've got an 11-month-old at the moment who's wild, and she's no.
Lovely. Mike, did you have something to add to that?
I mean, just really, there is so much to learn about, being a parent, and things that you've got to do certain things, but really just taking things easy. Just realise that there's no right or wrong way. If you get the nappy on wrong, you just do another one. You get another one, you put it back on again. It's like you just got to try again, really. But it just really means that you just do things in your own way. They might be a little bit different, but if you do things in your own way, then it's going to be a lot more easier. So don't think that you've got to do something in a specific way. Don't think that you've got to do things right. Just try again. So don't worry about it, whatever happens.
Lovely. Kasha?
Don't listen to the pressure, the parent pressure. And just on that, Mike, parent pressure is massive, and don't listen to it. You don't need to worry about having the best and the newest and keeping up with the Joneses. Just do what you need to do.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I think, sometimes listening to friends who already had kids may not be helpful, because then you're kind of adding like additional things that you think you should be doing, when actually later on looking back, I'm thinking, no, I kind of, there are things that definitely the baby needs, but equally it's more important, like my friend, for example, told me that I had to iron baby's clothes and on both sides, and I did it, and I was like, why that, it just made me tired doing all of that. I would have prioritized my rest, actually, if it was me back then. Now, but there are things that you do because you think you've got to do them, and I think that especially with the first one, there are a lot of fears and anxieties, and you want to get things right. There's this little creature. I think actually, for example, the first baths and things, that was really difficult, because the baby is just tiny, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what if it kind of just slips out of my hand, and that sort of fears and anxieties, or you kind of listen, is the baby breathing, and things like that, because you hear about cough death, and yes, parents need to know about this, but I think it's equally important to recognize when we are kind of going overboard with anxiety and checking up on baby and things like that, because that may not be helpful, not for us and not for the baby either.
I agree. It's natural to compare yourself to other people, because we want to do what's absolute best, and we're on the internet, we're surrounded by people sharing everything online, and what we forget is what's being shared online isn't everything. It's not all the tears that they have. It's not all the fears. It's all the wonderful things. And so, that's why things like this is important, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything else and wonderful that comes with it. Which brings us to our next topic, which is pregnancy loss and miscarriage. As I said, as this is quite a sensitive topic, if you need to mute, then please do, and I will pop up the next question that we're going to before we change topic, so you'll know when to unmute, as it were. So, pregnancy loss and miscarriage. This is something I have a lot of fears around because I have a condition called endometriosis, which is where the lining of the uterus, a very similar type of material, grows wherever it pleases around your abdominal walls and things like that. And it can mean things like miscarriage could be very common, and your chances of being pregnant are kind of skew-whiffed as well. And it's kind of, you know, how do we manage that as dyspraxic people, but also pregnancy as well, because that is a huge change in your body. And I see people saying all the time, you know, does your dyspraxia get more, you know, severe? Are you going to be more clumsy? How do you manage that?
I'll just first off, pregnancy is a really interesting experience as a neurodiverse person, because I'm dyspraxia, especially because your center of gravity changes. I bushwalk. I'm a Cub Scout leader, and I love to get out and do a lot of hiking. And I have to take walking sticks after about 16 weeks because I'm all over the place, and I don't like injuring myself because falling's not nice. And especially when you're a pregnant person, and I think that's another thing, is because you fall over so often, everyone's so concerned, but you fall over all the time, so you're very used to it. The other thing is also the sensory overwhelm of like morning sickness, and the whole process of your body changing is such a unique thing. And but then you have that constant anxiety of loss and things like that in the early days, which I think we might focus on first, if that's all right, just to get that out of the way. Because there is so much that's there about pregnancy but anyway, I am of the mind, because of our neurodiversity, that and I think a lot of other people have sort of moved towards this, is that we should celebrate everything that happens from conception to loss to birth and the whole process. And I think that's very important for us to all change the narrative on pregnancy and loss to be something that's worth celebrating in every step of the way.
Absolutely agreed. It's one of those things where you hear people say it all the time, things like miscarriage and loss, like it's quite a common thing. But then again, we don't talk about it because it's meant to be something that, you know, supposedly we should keep to ourselves. Respectfully, not everyone wants to talk about it because it is quite a difficult thing. But it's natural as well. So a lot of people think that if I had a miscarriage, I did something wrong. Maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe it was my dyspraxia. Maybe, you know, these things are happening to me because of something. It's not. It's just one of those really unfortunate things that happens, and it can happen for no known reason. It's just one of those things where sometimes your body just isn't ready for it yet. And, you know, sometimes those things happen, and it can be really traumatic, especially if it happens kind of later on, especially later in pregnancy or even after birth, if they've been around for a while. And I know, as we all are dyspraxic, we do feel our emotions quite intensely. And let's just drop John back in. Hi, John. It's understanding that, because again, we have so many fears and we naturally go to blame ourselves. Would anyone else like to add to this topic?
Yeah, I can. I mean, basically with pregnancy, loss and miscarriage, that's something that's very close to my heart. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Basically I've lost a few babies, and, you know, had a baby that unfortunately did, pass in my arms, which was a bit traumatic. And it's obviously something we never forget. And it's quite tricky to actually, you know, go forward and try again. But, I've always got that, feeling. I always, remember his birthdays and everything like that as well. So sometimes, give yourself a bit of time, make sure that you're looking after yourself if that has happened, unfortunately. And then, when you're ready, don't let anybody, make that decision. When both parties are ready, then, try again. And it is a very hard thing, to go through, but you will get there in the end. So as I've done as well.
I think
infertility on that as well is something. So I'm in the same boat. I've had a loss as well. I've got 3 children out of 5 pregnancies, so I've been there as well. But the hardest part is, I think for a lot of us, is that there are so many changes that happen within it as well, and we have to radically accept each on the way to sort of cope and get through it, especially when you've got other children as well.
I think allowing yourself, kind of as Mike said, it's allowing yourself to take the time that you need. And the more you talk about it with people who are close to you, the more you start to realize that it's more common than we think. And it's happened to people who are so close to us. And it's the kind of people we think, well, if they said that to us, you would kind of take them in with open arms. And it's the same kind of thing as well. If you need to talk to someone about it, don't hold it in, do kind of share with people who are close to you, but take the time that you need. There's no rush on it. There's no time limit. There is no right or wrong way to handle it. Especially when, some people who you may know who had a miscarriage as well, or loss, and they became pregnant again quite quickly after. And you might be thinking a year, 2, maybe 3 down the line, and you can't. That's fine. That's your time. That's no trouble.
And I think, just from the comments as well, I just want to highlight that just because we talk about biological children, there are so many options to be a parent without going through the biological child option. My husband has a stepchild, and you would not be able to tell that they are not biologically related because of how close they are. So don't be afraid to think about those other options of fostering, looking at adoption and those kind of things as well. Because there's not as much discrimination out there now.
No, absolutely. I second that. I've worked in fostering, and I was fostered for a very short time. Mike's just going to drop out quickly because his camera is going to give everyone a seizure. But yeah, so for myself, because I know that I will be having fertility issues, I've not ruled out that I could end up fostering or adopting. Fostering is something I want to do at some point in my life anyway, regardless of whether or not I have kids. But there are many options. If being pregnant is something you fear, that's fine. As Danielle said, there are more options of having family. It's not all biological. Your family is who you choose as well.
Yeah, on that, I'm actually currently walking my eldest. So I have a non-binary teenager who I love them to death. They are fantastic, awesome kid who is dyspraxic and neurodiverse. And that child is now looking at parenthood and those kind of things, much like many of you in the comments of, now that I'm becoming an adult, what do I do next? Is parenthood possible? And for them, the sensory, they watched me go through a pregnancy 12 months ago and had decided at that point that pregnancy is not for them, but they are also open to that fostering thing. And this kid loves social work, so this is right up their alley. So you do need to have a look at yourself and go, well, is this realistic? This back to managing expectations. Can I manage the whole thing of it? Is there a way that I can do this in a way that's kind to myself? Because no one else writes the rule book on parenting but you.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll move on to the next question now. So I'll just allow people a chance to unmute the stream if they need to. We're just waiting on Mike to come back in. I think he might be turning his computer off and on. We'll start without him, but we'll hopefully kind of catch him up to speed when he jumps back in. So birth and the early days. So Kasia did briefly touch on this, especially in terms of bathing a newborn baby that's only a couple of days old and the fear of them slipping out. They are so small and fragile. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I can go first.
Yeah.
I think for me, I had a cesarean section, but that's because I'm also like to call myself a scoliosis warrior. So I had issues with my spine when I was a teenager. That was the reason. So I guess that. For me, I was on strong painkillers having to do with that pain. And I think what was actually worse was breastfeeding initially, because my son had real problems latching on to my breast, and I had too much milk and breast infection. I actually was thinking that, oh, I'm going to give up after I think a week of trying, of like literally my nipples being, beaten to like bleeding. And that's, as women, we know how sensitive they are and how painful that can feel. So I think that was, mixed with, you know, um, feeling not good enough as mom, because you're meant to be breastfeeding because this is the best for the baby. And clearly it is, if a woman is able to breastfeed and chooses this is the recommended option. But I think there comes a lot of guilt in the meantime when you're trying to do it. It's not happening. And there are a lot of different emotions to to deal with. So I think luckily for me and my son, and I say for me as well, because I think that actually breastfeeding is easier without having to sterilize the bottles and all that hassle. So, after I think a week, we managed to get to a stage where things were fine. But I will never forget that initial week. That was just,
Sorry, Kasia, did you get any, just curiosity, did you get any special support from health visitors or anything? Because my girlfriend's training to be a breastfeeding supporter herself. She's training to help people through it, and she has been quite curious about if anyone has dyspraxia or autism or any other like sensory issues, how she could support them. So I was wondering if are there any advice for when she watches this back later?
So I think I had support from a midwife in hospital, because I had a cesarean cut, so I stayed in hospital a bit longer. I think that I didn't find that support, to be honest, that helpful, because in a way they showed me how to, try to get him to latch on. But when it wasn't happening, they would just give him a bottle, which is not helpful in the sense, because if baby starts, feeding, if you start to feed the baby with a bottle, it's actually quite easy to get milk from a bottle, and it's, sucking a breast is actually hard work for the baby. So if I kind of didn't find it personally that helpful. So and I used the pump initially, because my breasts were kind of just full of milk and just so painful. So I think you had to try to take some out before you get an infection developing inside and things. But I didn't find the support that I had helpful. But that was 17 years ago, so.
Well, the things I can say on that recently, a little bit more recently, a lot of the education around breastfeeding has changed, and now they don't try and shove a bottle in your face. If anything, it's the other way around. They try so hard to keep you breastfeeding for as long as possible that sometimes it's almost too far how they push it. But on that, there's not a lot of education about breastfeeding aversion and dyspraxia in breastfeeding, and the difference between having my child 5 years ago and even this time around. And we'll go to the COVID differences. But I stayed home for 12 months and got to lay down and feed my child instead of having to manage wear boobs and shirts and things like that are. And there could be so much that could be done to educate educate dyspraxia and neurodiversity. Particularly, I don't know about how it went for you, but could we have access breastfeeding panels that we don't have to use claws to get into, because and do up at the back? So some accessible baby stuff would be lovely. And I think that's, I've seen a lot of accessible bras and things like that, but if we could move that to maternity, that would be absolutely fantastic. Because there are other disabilities that are breastfeeding too, and we need to start including breastfeeding women in our disability clothes. But that's just a whole separate aside for me. But the breastfeeding part particularly, and learning about it has it really helps now that a lot of the education is out there that it's not how to breastfeed and the baby has to learn. It's a learning give and take. So you are learning how the baby's cues, and the baby is learning from your cues, and there's no amount of a midwife or a lactation consultant standing over your shoulder trying to fix your latch that's going to make that process any easier when you're at 2 o'clock in the morning and your coordination's out the window, or whether it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you're trying to make bottles and deal with dinner and everything else. No matter what, it's a tough battle. And those early days, particularly when we look back at them, we look at them fondly and go, wow, I can't believe we make through it. But when you're in the thick of it and you are sleep deprived, you don't know what you're doing, the baby keeps crying, it keeps making noises that you don't know what that means. That's when we need to wrap our arms around other parents and say, hey, you've got this. And that's probably, I think, for dyspraxic parents, the most important part, where they need to be told, you can do this and you've got this, because that's where the faith really wears thin.
I'd say there's definitely that kind of comfort in the whole, this might sound really strange when I say it, but when you're struggling and suffering with something, it's better when you're doing it with other people. And so by having other people be able to comfortably share with you, this is what I've struggled with, I'm really struggling, and someone else goes, oh my God, so am I. And then you can work that together and be able to kind of share those experiences, because sometimes it can be quite lonely. So I was a parent figure for a short time when I was younger, and for me it was very lonely. I didn't have other people to kind of go to. I didn't feel like I could go to people because I felt that because I was different, I know that I'm different, they might judge me for not being able to do a certain thing, and worried that if I openly said I can't do this, then I would be judged for it, and that would potentially have a negative impact on me. But then it's remembering that when you're a first-time parent or first-time parent figure, everyone's new to it. No one else has really done it before unless they've worked in childcare, but it's new to everyone. You're not just going to wake up one day and suddenly know how to do everything. Like, I know people who have been parents for years, and then a new technique comes along and they kind of go, oh, I never knew about that, and if I'd have known about it, things would have been quite different. So being able to just share that with people is really important. So Michael, John,
on that, online communities are brilliant from that, and I know COVID emphasized that for a lot of people, but if you look for neurodiverse parenting groups, you'll find a lot of similar crossover and so that's not just listening to autistic parents and dyspraxic parents and ADHD parents. It's a combination of just knowing that they've been through what you've been through, or you're going to go through what they're going to go through later as well, and that sense of community, even though it isn't as good as having someone drop into your house and say hi and do the dishes. It very much just helps you in that isolation feeling, which Jonathan was saying as well.
Lovely. Michael, do you want to add to that at all, or should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, well, just on the back of one of the things you said, Crystal, about realising that everybody's been through these struggles, that's one thing when I wrote my blog, as I found, is a lot of people, dyspraxic parents, have struggled, but some non-dyspraxic parents have struggled with the same things as me. Obviously, mine were maybe just a bit more amplified. So one thing I found really difficult with there was a few milk bottles. My son is breastfed, but my partner started expressing, so I could feed him from bottles. And there were some bottles that would take me like 20 minutes to screw the cap on, and I would just try and avoid using that bottle, that particular type of bottle. And I'd sometimes just wash and sterilise new bottles entirely just to avoid that particular type of bottle. And then I found that some non-dyspraxic parents sometimes get that as well. I think they're tired, they're hungry, they've not slept in a long time, their baby's crying and they're trying to rush, and sometimes they can't get it as well. So I think that is one of the really important things, is just talk to other parents, whether they're neurotypical, neurodivergent or neurotypical, and just see what they can advise and bounce ideas off each other. And ultimately you'll just kind of struggle through and, get there eventually. It's probably the thing that I learned the most in the last couple of months.
On that though, this is totally aside. I love baby wearing. Baby wearing is awesome. As a dyspraxic person, baby wearing, different story. And this is where I just wanted a moment to say, you don't need to compare yourself to other parents. And it happens in baby wearing circles, in cloth nappy circles, a lot of the parenting groups where, and I'm not calling out neurotypical people, but it's just in the wider community. There's a lot of parenting shame and parenting competition and keeping up with the Joneses. And early days, you tend to be quite susceptible to that, especially with baby blues. And when you're looking and reaching out so much for validation and just an idea of if you've got everything on the right, path. But I ended up going too far into the baby wearing rabbit hole and felt the pressure to keep up, to the point that I had injured my hand and was still trying to wrap and baby wear. And I didn't look at the signs and go, well, hang on, maybe I need to step back. And now, but don't get me wrong, I love baby wearing. And it is a very handy tool, because when you do have a child on you, tied in, if you're clumsy like I am with my hands, it's nice that they're held securely against you. I didn't, the pressure to do it really well was too hard. And now I'm much more kinder to myself, much more forgiving, but you do need to have a good look at when you're comparing yourself to other people and say, hang on a sec, is this a real expectation of myself? Is this something that I can do and repeat doing when I'm tired, when I'm good? And I think that early on in baby life is when that you are most susceptible to that. And reach out for help, talk to someone else, ask for the validation from other people, be honest and open, because this is the time that you need to be vulnerable and for your village and your community to look after you.
Absolutely. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, I think the worst thing about, well, not the worst thing particularly, but with the sleep deprivation, when you just don't get any sleep and you're trying to do things, and this is, you just think, what am I doing? Your mind's a bit of a mush as well. But like you were saying as well, John, it's just like, particularly with the bottles, it's like, right, I need to sterilize this, I need to get it to the right temperature, and then you think, oh, it's gone too cold, and you need to get it back up again, or you need to drop it down. So you will get there. And I was very lucky, in the early days, after my son was born, that I had my mum stop with me for at least 2 weeks. So it was great, because she could go, okay, well, have you tried this? And have you tried this? And, obviously, her bringing me up, it was just like, something that I could actually help out with. And she was like, oh, I can help you do these bottles, or I can do this where you have a bit of a sleep. And, just take all that support when you can, because, it's important, obviously to look after yourself as well, as we'll talk about in the bit.
Yeah, definitely ask for help if you need it.
Yeah, self-care is very important. As in the first 2 weeks, I was off on paternity leave, and my partner was obviously off on maternity leave. And some of the best advice I got was asking for help. My manager at work, he had a young child at the time, and he was like one of those managers, like a life mentor. And he was good. He's like, organise those 2 weeks way ahead. Speak to your parents, your friends, uncles and aunties of the child. They like deliver you food, because you don't want to get into the habit of doing takeaway all the time. So we had, people bringing up food all the time, we had people coming up and just taking the child or son Corin for like 2 hours, and then that 2 hours, Deb was like, okay, I'm going to sleep right now, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to cook. So yeah, if you do have people around you, I know everyone won't be lucky enough to have that all the time, but if you do have anyone, make sure and ask them in advance, like, oh yeah, I'm going to book you in for one of these days in that first 2 weeks, and you're going to come and help, you know, because I found it really helpful, because I think I would have been overwhelmed otherwise, you know, and it was quite overwhelming anyway, but that extra bit of help took the pressure off of me, because my partner had surgery, so it wasn't just a normal being a parent, it was being a parent, she's had surgery, she can't do as much, and obviously the dyspraxia, but there's a lot of things that either I'm not going to be able to do, or it's going to take me like an extra half hour, 15 minutes. So I really took advantage of having so many friends and family nearby. And I'd recommend if you can do that, like do it, schedule them in.
And the other part with accept help with from everything, and I think we fall into a trap as mothers, particularly of, oh, but I can do it, you know, better than this other person. 2% is better than 0%. And you have to remember that. And this is probably one of my best mottos to live through life, is that anything is better than nothing. And it really matters when it comes to this whole baby thing as well. You know, you might think, I'm not doing well. I can't get up out of bed. I can't talk to the baby. I've got nothing left in me. How can I get forward? And this leads into postnatal depression. But you've got to remind yourself every day that it's just a little step. If I take one step, it's one step closer. But yeah, so go back to what you're saying. Yes.
I mean, yeah, it does link in very closely to postnatal depression, because there's all those fears of, you know, should I tell someone I'm struggling with this? Are they going to judge me for me saying that I'm struggling with this? Should I be struggling with this? And there's so much that can come with that. Obviously, I've personally not experienced that, so I'll kind of leave it to you guys to discuss on this one. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, postnatal depression was a big part of, you know, when my son was born. Basically, I struggled quite a lot, obviously, for the first 2 weeks on my son being born, and having to have medical help from doctors. Again, take support if you feel that you're just not coping with something. Use the support, you know, all the support networks, because there are people that can actually help you with that. And I never knew as a male that, or as a father, that you could actually get postnatal depression, but you can. It is more kind of found out with you know, with women, but men have it just as much as well. So basically, you know, it was crazy times. You know, I had family visiting, and you know, really. You know, coming over and that should be like, oh yeah, you know, be in a happy place. It's like, oh, this is brilliant. And there was just times where, you know, unfortunately I was breaking, but you know, with the support of my parents, support my wife as well, you know, they helped me to get through it. You know, I wouldn't go out, but sometimes my advice would be, even if you don't feel like it, you know, just take yourself out of that moment for a little bit. Just maybe go for a little bit of a walk around the block. We're not talking miles. We're just saying go out for 5-10 minutes, just to get back to yourself, and just to kind of refresh your mind and say to yourself that that's going to be okay. It was so hard for people to actually get me to go out and do that, because I was feeling, well, you know, I've got to go out and I want to go out, but I can't, because I need to be looking after my baby and I need to be supporting my wife and all these kind of things. And eventually, yeah, I was kind of told, go out, we've got this, go out for a run or something. And when I came back, it was absolutely fine. So what I'd say, you know, particularly for that is, if you can have a bit of your space back, because it's very busy, because like there's everything going on, you know, am I doing things right? Like we said, you know, what's going to happen if X, Y, and Z happens? Can I do this? do I feel that I'm being a bit of a burden, asking for help all the time? But like we say, you know, you've got the support there. Ask for support. Have the support. If you need a little bit of headspace, then do that, because not only, you know, a father can go out and get headspace, it's important for the mother to get headspace as well, in a different way. So whether that's just, you know, having a baby and the mother, you know, if they're okay to go for a bit of a walk, or just have a little bit of their time just to reflect, and I think it's really important to do that, really. So as I say, and don't worry about admitting that maybe you've got this kind of issue, and saying that you've got postnatal depression or anything like that, because it's not something to be ashamed of. You know, it does happen, and you know, it's just important to know that there is you know, support where you can get it, and just take what support you can take. You know, if you need counselling, go for it, because it really does help, and it helps push you know, people kind of in the right direction. But the main thing is, as much as it's hard to you know, to not worry, and people say don't worry about things, and you know, I'm a being dyspraxic since I was 13 years old, I'm a massive worrier. You just have to try and talk to yourself and say, you know, everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be fine. So as I say, use your support, and you know, and don't worry about it if you can, and you know, don't worry if you get upset or anything like that. It's all part. It's a big change. It's one of the biggest changes that you could probably have. You know, welcoming you know, someone who's living into your life. So just know where that support is, and don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. I'm really glad that, Mike, you've spoken about this, because I think it's probably more from my professional experience that it's important for everyone to know that, you know, we can't predict whether we are going to be affected by depression or not. And equally, even, for example, I work with some people who are going through adoption process as well. And even when you adopt, it's similarly to, you know, that's a big change, and the post-adoption depression can happen similarly to postnatal depression, and both to females, males, non-binary, you know, there's no, you know, to anyone. So I think the shame bit is something that needs to be addressed, and with really talking about it and encouraging people to seek support, and really to notice if they are feeling really exhausted, which clearly they will be as new parents. But there's like the level to it when it's really not going away, and they find, you know, anyone finding themselves feeling like they are really tearful all the time, which, and I know that there's the normal baby blues down to the hormones, for example, hormonal changes happening in women. So we as moms will be over the place initially after giving birth, but it's more as well how long this is kind of going on. I wouldn't I would really say that seek support as soon as you can, and really include the self-care moments and time to yourself, and getting enough sleep. And that's something really, I think, important.
And on that as well, education really matters with postnatal depression. So I have problems with postnatal depression. I had a baby at the height of lockdown, the first lockdown. And that was my third child. I already knew that I was predisposed to it. I also have breastfeeding aversion, which is something we didn't talk about earlier, but there are things that can go wrong with just everyday things that you do, like breastfeeding aversion, and they affect your mental health and your mental illness. And I know that dyspraxics, we probably deal with it on a more regular basis than other people do. So we have a lot more experience in our own mental health. I know I'm very adept at knowing when I'm starting to slip. But the problem is that you don't know where that line between I'm okay, and I'm really not okay can be, when you add the layer of sleep deprivation and the needs of a baby and the changes that you're going through. And it's really important to, even if you're not, you don't feel that you're too bad, if you have a predisposition to depression and anxiety, by all means, make contact with your midwife. Tell them from the start, hey, look, you know, I know that I get depressed. I know I've probably got the markers for postnatal depression. Just talk to me in 6 weeks and ask me how I'm going, because you won't remember it. But on the midwife file, they will. But the overarching thing to dealing with all of that for us, when I was in the situation I was 12 months ago, was about education. I knew that breastfeeding aversion would get better if I was hydrated, if I knew what I was dealing with and breathed my way through it, and that it would pass after the feed, and I would have a different experience the next time. Just having the knowledge of that sign, that symptom, it helped rationalize what I was going through, and keeping myself grounded through that was really important through a lot of the height of the unknown. And that's probably where we're going to struggle with the new generation of parents coming through, because things have been so vastly different between 5 years ago and having a child in 2020. And so things have, and we also have to deal with a lot of parents who have gone through a traumatic experience. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But education and knowing your own mental health and being educated within that. So, what are the signs of depression? What are the signs of anxiety? How do I self-care? And that's just eat, sleep, make sure you're hydrated, go for a walk. Looking after the very basic mental health first aid. And we don't educate mental health first aid very much, and it needs to be something that we sort of take on board more readily and more easily.
Mental health is something that's been spoken about a lot in more recent years, but the postnatal side of it, it's still very kind of, you never really hear about it. So definitely thanks for sharing that. And as everyone here has said, when you start to see yourself slip, talk to someone. It will be the best thing for you. Don't wait until it gets to a point where you're really struggling, because it only kind of hurts yourself. So this brings us on to our next topic, which is realistic expectations and self-care. We have touched on this as we've kind of gone through, but we'll focus on it more a little bit now. I will just also mention at the end, you can ask questions for our guests to answer. So if you have any questions that you're thinking about that we haven't mentioned, pop it into the chat. We can see the chat. So we'll get to that at the end. But yeah, so realistic expectations and self-care, these things are so important, and it can be such a huge game changer for things, especially being dyspraxic and managing things like timing, something that we're all potentially quite shocking at as dyspraxics, knowing how to do things, because you always see on the parenting programs on TV and in the books, people talk about it, this happens at this time, that happens at that time, and the reality is that doesn't always happen. So how would you share your experiences of those?
So we don't go off timetables. We believe in our house, we work off a structure, not a schedule. So things like, and I think education is changing towards this with parenting, using wake windows. So I know that my little baby needs to go to sleep probably an hour and a half after she's been awake of a morning. Doesn't matter what time she gets up. We just know that that's loosely what we've got. We know that my middle child needs to go to school sometime between 8:20 and 8:50. We know that it takes 5 minutes to get to school, so fit it into there. And it's just about prioritizing, keeping things flexible. But when you get into a good routine, and I think that's really important with parents. And I've got a lot of friends who are neurodivergent and didn't find their stride until their children started going to school, because just of how big a routine changer that is. And once you get to that pattern of every day doing the same thing in and out, and the kids getting used to that as well, your life changes magically for the better. And I'm sure others will agree when they've had that wonderful age gap. But until then, it's very difficult to manage the self-care, and the best advice on that is to be realistic with your expectations. And you think you've lowered your expectations, lower them a little bit further, because it's the best way to go through. And I particularly like the parenting model by Dr. Ross Green, which is the collaborative parenting proactive solution, where we have to look at how the kids are doing things and say, well, let's see it from their point of view. And a lot of the times just having that change of perception of, okay, let's see it from the kid's point of view, has made me realize that the expectations that most people have on kids is way too far high. And we need to just come back down to their level and start again. And that, I know I keep saying, but that changed, that parenting knowledge was a massive breakthrough for us. And it meant that our very explosive 6-year-old calmed down. Our teenager then felt they could advocate for things on their own. All sorts of things changed, from changing that perception of, I'm not going to tell you what to do, we're going to work together, and that also taught the kids then the importance of self-care, because you can't be regulated like that to make decisions about what's good for your body if you're not looking after yourself and looking after your body as a whole, drinking, eating, exercising, as well as how you feel about yourself. And I think that a lot of us have had that expectations dropped over the last 12 months, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe that was a good thing for us all to sort of work on prioritize what's important. And to our kids, and especially coming from a neurodiverse and dyspraxic background, we have a very minimalist house because I can't put time into cleaning up. I really can't. We have tubs instead of drawers because I'm not folding 5 million shirts every day. And the kids don't expect my kids to either, when they're only going to wear the same 3 shirts. Yay, school uniforms. But, and when it's taking those shortcuts and those bits of, and so for me, self-care very much is, how have I made my day easier? And that comes back to the expectations. My self-care is lowering my expectations and managing those expectations within that. And it makes everything else easier. And that includes pouring, I know that if I don't invest in myself, I have nothing to give to my kids. And it's something we probably lack, being carers and things like that as well, is that we need to invest in ourselves. Otherwise we can't be the best parent and best carer to our children, or the best teacher if you're homeschooling as well. And and it's very difficult to play all those different roles on an empty cup and an empty belly.
One of the things we actually touched on the other day when we did a chat is on the whole kind of stereotyping thing and breaking down those stereotypes. You don't have to do things a certain way because history has said you have to do them a certain way. You don't have to be the mum who stays at home and the mum who does all the hard work, and you don't have to be the dad who's the one who goes to work and kind of comes in and stuff. Like, you don't have to do that. There is no, this is how this has to be done, this is how that has to be done. And I think, in more recent years, our generations have definitely massively broken down those stereotype walls. And I know from these guys here, definitely do that. So me, on a personal level, I do not cook. I do not go near the kitchen because I'm an accident waiting to happen. My partner does all the cooking. The kitchen is his space. I don't cook. And I know that when it comes to us parenting, he will probably do the main, what would be mum duties. And I would be doing other bits like working and such. And I know that I'll let you guys explain it because it's not for me to share. But I know that, it doesn't have to be like that.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, just be realistic with what you can do. As I touched on before, if you, people saying, oh, you've got to get the nappy on first time because, you've got all these nappies in bags and stuff and you'll get through them too quick. It's like, well, you just got to say, well, don't worry, you will get it. Just try again. It's not a problem. I mean, touching briefly on what you were saying, Crystal, about like the kind of stereotyping things. Really, it's just like, well, I was able to obviously feed my son with a bottle and so forth. So I was able to help out with that. So yeah, people might say that you've got to do this, and this, and this, but if you can do a little bit to help out to your partner, then it's realistic in itself, really. And obviously touching about the self-care, as we did briefly, it's really important to just look after yourself. Make sure that you get in, people said that, you just have to kind of make sure that you're well fed, make sure you're well, you got plenty of drink and all this kind, and make sure that you're sleeping at the right times if you can, and get sleep when you can, because you've got to look after yourself. If you can't look after yourself, then it's a bit tricky to look after somebody else. So but yeah, just it's just really important to make sure that you're in tip-top condition as much as you can be to help out. And like I say, don't if someone says you've got to do this, you haven't. No one can tell you how to bring up your own child. Just do it in your own way.
I think it's using each other's strengths as well. And Danielle, you spoke a bit on this the other day, where I'll let you take it.
Yeah, that's right. So my husband and I role reverse, but that's
not I think that
true of it all.
Oh, carry on.
Oh, sorry.
You there, John?
I cut it there. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, I think I'm back on now. But no, that is certainly one thing, is the expectations people place on themselves as parents and about themselves and their children. I found that at work there was some other people, and online there was some other people who had young children, and they're like, oh yeah, I've managed to go back to the gym after 6 days, and my baby is like sleeping through the night. And I'm like, okay. And I think that's one of the things you need to kind of decide for yourself, is like, what are your goals as a parent? What are your goals for yourself and your child? Because we never valued him sleeping through the night. We're like, well, we want him to be comfortable, we want him to be healthy and well. And for us, that doesn't mean sleeping through the night. It means that, well, we want him to be breastfed. So if he's up at 4 a.m. for a feed, then that's fair enough. And then obviously, with my dyspraxia or my autism, which I didn't know I had at the time, is worse because he's up, then I just need to work out how to do that. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go to another room for a little while and just try and sleep there. So yeah, I think it's very much like, it's your own expectations, like what's good for you, your partner, if you're loving your partner, and your child, and then go with that. Don't compare yourself to other people, especially because you might not know everything that goes behind their comment. They'll be like, oh yeah, the baby went down at 8 o'clock last night. It's like, okay, but they might be screaming their head off from 5 till 8, and then eventually, so you don't know the whole story behind other people's lives. So it's very much just, do you, and after that, like, just, be happy as you can be.
Yeah, I think people would be very shocked at how much sleep I'm getting at the moment. It's not a lot. But on that, I'm the breadwinner in the house. So my husband and I have a role reversal. He cares for everybody in the family. He's our stay-at-home. He's the rock that we all build on. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to go and do what I do in education. If it wasn't for him, he wouldn't be able, my teenager wouldn't be able to do what they need to do. And I don't know how we would survive. I was a single parent for 7 years with my teenager in tow. I smashed everything out, got a lot of stuff done, but I don't know how I did things without my husband now, because we are both interdependent is probably the best way to describe our relationship. In that he has strengths that I pull on, I have strengths that I pull on, and we offset our weaknesses with each other. So, I'm great at managing a budget, which is funny because I have impulse spending problems. Hey, ADHD. But he is fantastic at, when it comes to big purchases, being the calm, level-headed person. So all my purchases I consult with him for, and we've got a good system with that. He likes to drive, and he's a very careful driver, so he is our taxi, and does a wonderful job. I can drive, and I do drive, but I'm a rev head, and we can't afford me getting tickets, so I don't drive very often. We also can't afford the repair bill when I drive too often either. So
I have a makeshift racing stripe down the side of my car, which I've mentioned a couple of times, courtesy of a parking trolley bay in Sainsbury's that's been there for about 2 years now. I also can't afford to get that fixed.
We have a bumper bar where it fell short from a retaining wall, and in the old house we used to park too close, and I have no idea where the front of my car is. So I would always just go and park until I bumped the retaining wall, and it's left cracks in the front of the car, and it looks awful. But hey, now I don't have to worry about it, so it's all good.
Yeah, I think what I would like to add is really like I think the main lesson for me actually has been letting go of trying to be perfect, because I had to be a mom and a dad for 17 years, and I realize now that I placed way too much pressure on myself to try to get everything, perfectly the best that my son could really have. And I think it has impacted actually on me years back, where I would worry a lot about different aspects of parenting and trying to get things right and managing being a parent and work. Then I decided to do a master's degree when my son was only 4.5 years old. So that was a crazy 2 years of my life, but I managed to do it, I think, one step at a time. But I think the main message is really, try to be realistic and think about your priorities. And the priorities will be really having the time for your child and enjoying that, because that will go so quickly. I can't believe that my son is, 17 now. I miss, those times when he was younger. But I think, it's being good enough is enough. We don't have to be perfect.
Yes.
And really that self-care aspect, and especially now that the pandemic has really made us realize of the importance of taking time to ourselves, to our families, just enjoying the little things. I know that a lot of all the guests have mentioned the need to exercise and sleep, and I think rest is another thing that actually is really, really important. And what I would want to just say, that actually rest can be a different thing for everyone, because one person can think, oh, okay, rest, I'll sit down and read a book or watch a film or listen to music. Another one will go for a walk, or actually sometimes, and normally I don't enjoy cleaning, but sometimes I do, because then it allows me, especially if my brain goes into sensory mode, I actually like to do something physical to get really my brain really of kind of the thinking mode, when it's just finding, processing all the information, all the sensory stuff too much. So doing
Angry
something
cleaning.
doing something can help. And I think that planning certain things, like I would, for example, get my son's clothes ready in the evening, so to kind of try to make things a bit easier in the morning. I would still end up running running with my son to take him to school, even though his school is 7 minutes away from where we live, and then running to work. But
I think that's a really important, though, Kesha, is that we do need to be so prepared, and you learn, and probably by the time you get to school, the school age thing particularly, all those hacks of you must get the clothes out the night before. And the reason why is not because the next morning, because you're going to run late the next morning anyway.
Yeah.
What you're doing is preventing having to wash clothes at 5 a.m. in the morning because you forgot that there was no clean clothes. And it's those extra steps that we dyspraxics tend to forget are involved in household chores. And as a parent, that's the bit that's tiring, is not just having to do the tasks, it's the pre-tasks to those tasks involved. And I think by the time you get to a 5-year-old, and that's the best bit, it's not as in public when they're little. You go to nursery, you're not going to see the same people again. You make mistakes. And I think you're very lucky that we do have such a supportive community around us to learn those things in. When your kid's walking around in bright yellow boots and a dress that's 5 sizes too big and a shirt that's 2 sizes too small, everyone just goes, oh, it's cute, it's a toddler. Not knowing that you were the one that found those clothes this morning in your sleep deprived state, and they were the only things that you could get over the head. So.
Yeah, I think that the preparation is definitely key. Like my son gets looked after 2 days a week when his mum's at work, so she makes sure and prepares everything the night before. That way, there's a lot less that I can do wrong. Somehow I still manage to mess things up on occasion. I'll forget to hand something over to the person looking after them. But yeah, because when I'm in charge of it, invariably, instead of being like, oh, half an hour because Deborah's prepared everything, it's like, okay, I need to get up 2 hours. And it'll take me 2 hours to get everything ready. Because I'm going to be like, oh, where's his hat? And I'm like, oh, I can't even remember. And then I'm looking for the hat for like 20 minutes. And it
Every
comes out, it's
About
like,
the rest
yeah.
of you.
Yeah, tasks are
But
never simple.
I have a 5-hour block of we're leaving by this time, minus 5 minutes for the mandatory, where is your shoes, where is your hat, did you pack your water bottle?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing I found recently is I'm so used to being disorganised that even when I start putting things in the designated place, sometimes I'll look other places first. And I'm like, I can't find my wallet. I'll check all the rooms. I'm like, oh no, you've started leaving your wallet there. And I'll go and the wallet's where I've decided to leave it. But because I'm so used to being disorganised, I'm just used to that sort of panic. And when there's an absence of panic, it's too strange. So I look for things to panic about.
If you have ADHD as well, that one simple task suddenly becomes 7 tasks before you remember what the first task was as well. So,
Yeah.
Well, I have
Just
autism. I have autism also. So sometimes even simple tasks, I feel as though I need to like mentally prepare for things. So if I'm up in the morning, I'm like, I need to get up and I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes and do nothing, so that I can do the next thing.
Yep.
And I don't think people appreciate that. If you need to build that in as well, like, oh, I need time to lose things. I also need time just to sit and think about doing nothing, about everything I need to do, and then do the actual tasks. And
Mental preparation is really important.
Yeah.
Just my self-care is also waking up before everybody else in the morning, and I'm just reading through the comments, and this does touch on what everyone's saying in the comments too. At 5 o'clock in the morning, there is no sound. Children are asleep. The lovely, delightful, soft sound of their breathing is a lovely anthem to having your morning cup of tea, reading your morning paper, getting yourself in the zone for the onslaught of getting children who don't want to get up and get ready for school to get up and get ready for school. And so if you need to find your way to do it, and it's finding those hacks. Like for me, it's just the silence of that time of morning, and I get to be the one who creates the sound. So I'm in control of how much sound. So if I want the kids to be loud and boisterous, I'll put on music. And I'll put on a boppy tune, and so that sets the pace of the mood that morning. Or if I know that the kids are going to be up and hyper because it's a sports carnival or something like that, I know I need to bring music in that'll quieten them down. And we have the technology now that all those things are very easy to do. And I know you guys have CBBS. We have ABC Kids over here, and they have audio apps that you can put things on that the kids are really interested in for free. And that just helps you manage that sound. And a lot of it comes down to management. When you talk about the sounds and everything else, you can't do much about emergency vehicles. I live on a major road. Well, I live between 2 major roads. For us, I just get to sit there and go, ooh, someone's in trouble and it's not me. But I'm a smart ass, so. But the loud crying and things like that. We're very much into attachment parenting. So I don't allow my kids to cry very much. If they hurt themselves, they fall over, they have to learn some resilience, and the floor will always win when you contact it with your face. And with Dyspraxics, we know that all too well. But we, with the kids particularly, you know, we teach them to take a deep breath, to calm down. But I don't like excessive crying, and I will pretty much stop my kids from ever getting to that point, because I don't think it's beneficial to them to learn that. But everyone has their own different ways of raising kids, and you as a parent can have a choice on how much noise you want to be acceptable in your house. And it starts at a young age. That's all.
Yeah, can I just add to that actually babies do not have the ability to emotionally self-regulate, so they actually do need their parent or carer to actually help them to do it. Yeah.
Yep. If your first 2 years of life are going to be holding a baby in your arms so it doesn't cry, the first 2 years of that baby's life is going to be held in your arms so it doesn't cry, because there's nothing that'll change it. But yeah, I'm very much with Kasha there. Is that it needs to be, the babies can't manipulate you, and the narrative around that needs to change, because babies crying and they have a need that needs to be met, and that need very much is probably just warm skin and a heartbeat, or mum.
Absolutely. Okay, so that brings us to our last topic of the evening. We'll just remind you guys again, you can ask questions at the end, so do pop them in the chat. If you don't have any questions to ask, that's fine. You don't have to bring a question. But the one thing that we've all been talking about for the last year is COVID. And the wonders of what has been in lockdown, which has now officially been a year for anyone who's in the UK, at least from my knowledge. And I think Australia potentially the same, roughly.
We closed our borders this time last year, about a week earlier. The night that my daughter was born, so she was born Easter long weekend, which is in 2 weeks' time, and she was born on the night that we had a death. So I live in regional New South Wales. Don't live in a major city, so we had only like 3 deaths of COVID in this area, and the first one was the night that my daughter was born in hospital. That's the closest we've gotten to this. We were in lockdown at the time, which for us meant that my mother-in-law couldn't come and look after the kids, so I went into my childbirth alone, because we had no one to watch our 2 other children at home, and when you've got 2 neurodiverse kids who have anxiety, the last thing you want to do is leave them alone. Even though I've got an age difference, and my eldest could have looked after my youngest, it wasn't the best place for them to be mental health wise. But we were a little bit lucky that our hospital stopped student midwives from coming in, and one of my best friends was a student midwife, so we managed to get her in as my +1, and she got a birth. So it all ended up, we played the system, and I ended up having a birth support person, but it was not my husband, it was a friend of mine instead. So it's a little bit different experience over here. We have had flare-ups from hotel quarantine and things leaked in the community, but life very much here is what you guys are expecting post the wind down from your lockdown. So as you open up, you're probably going to have very similar things that we have over here. We're informed every day if it's in our sewage, if there's any COVID tests in the sewage. We're very lucky that there hasn't been, and it's quite controlled. So I guess we're the post life over here, and I hope you guys get to it, because it's heartbreaking to watch what you guys are going through.
Yeah, it is very hit and miss at the moment. And John, when was your baby born?
July 2019. So it was sorry, quick math. It was 8.5 months old. We went into lockdown, so there was like a marked change. You know, so my partner, when I was at work, my partner always had him out at various clubs and things, you know, baby sensory and other things. So he was developing, you know, seeing other babies every single day, and we were also taking him to some swim lessons and stuff. And then that all stopped very suddenly, and I also had to work from home every day, and she couldn't take him out. So that was a very, very big change for me. I went from being around him a few hours every day, and then being able to take him out at night and take him out at the weekend, to being in the house when he's crying a lot, but I'm not able to do anything because I'm at work. And that was very challenging. That was the biggest challenge of lockdown, is being around but not being able to help. And, you know, dyspraxia, you can get quite easily, and autism, you'd be very easily distracted and struggle with noise, and that was a really big change because it's one of those things. If I'm around him and he's upset, it feels bad, but not as bad as when I'm not able to help. Because if I'm in the same room, he's crying, I'll pick him up, I'll try and play with him. Whereas if I'm trying to like do spreadsheets and I can just hear him crying, and I'm like, oh well, I hope he's okay, but I can't help. That was the biggest challenge for me personally.
But yeah, I can imagine that, especially like as you said, with being autistic and dyspraxic, that kind of sensory of, you know, being so sensitive to sound and things, but also emotionally of, I can't do anything right now. I can see it and I can hear it, but it's like I'm in a different room. And the other thing as well, with COVID, so in the UK, I had, for some reason, all the people I went to school with had a baby in the same year, and they had to birth completely alone. They weren't allowed to have any friends or family with them either. And I can't imagine what that would be like. I mean, Danielle, like, thankfully you were able to have a friend with you, but it's still not your partner or your family.
No.
And John
and was in a official capacity as a student midwife as well. So there was she had to go and do other things as well.
Yeah.
So it was more just, I knew the midwife. It's more a country town situation than it was really having someone. Yeah.
And I think those have changed now. So at least in the UK, the other parent is allowed to be with the mother, which is really, really good. And I think depending on where you are as well, if the infection rates go up, then they'll put restrictions back on that. But the other thing that I guess both Danielle and John will know quite well is that with the baby groups and things stopping, your support network kind of disappears almost, and it becomes very much online. And so we change our support from being in person, and there's that social element of being able to see people, being able to physically see people in front of you. It's a completely different world to talking to people online. You may be speaking to more people because you're speaking to them online, but that interaction, it just doesn't match up. How have you managed with that?
Well, I personally found it.
The other problem is the other problem being dyspraxic is organising those things. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I forget when Zoom meetings are. So it's really easy for me to go, it's 12:26. Oh, I should have been online at 12. Whoops. And by then, we're already socially awkward. I don't want to go in there late and have to explain myself yet again that I'm late. Whereas if we were out in the real world and we did rock up, 25 minutes late to play group, it's not the biggest thing. You've got sympathy. But doing it online, when it feels more like we've got no excuse because we're at home. Meanwhile, we're struggling with our executive function, struggling with everything else on top of the sleep deprivation and everything else. And just on the particularly for the COVID times, and it affected me in day 5 when I had a little baby. My baby was born a lot smaller than what I thought she was going to be. I have chunky babies. This kid was tiny and then chunked up, so I had to go out to the shops and buy an outfit. And just the community, the look on little old people's faces as you're carrying this tiny little baby. You could be day 3 baby blues, mastitis, milk engorged, no sleep, spewing your hair. It doesn't matter for that 30 seconds because you've made someone smile. And during COVID, that was really important. And when nearly, when we're so stuck at home with our little babies, we need that human interaction, and that lack of connection and human touch just through facial expressions was really missed. And you go through without that sympathy of, going to play group or just going to the mothers groups for weigh-ins and hearing, I've only had 2 hours sleep. And even though you're not a part of that conversation, you know that there's someone else out there who's doing the exact same thing. Forums don't give you that same eavesdropping power. It doesn't give you the same feeling, knowing physically that there's someone 3 houses or suburbs away who is going through exactly the same thing as you. And that human touch is so important for particularly mental health of new mums. Then you add in the isolation and the fact that everyone is going through a traumatic event at the same time. And it has really messed up a lot of people that I think won't notice it for a little bit longer until we start to heal and start to come out of this.
Yeah, sorry, just on the back of that, that's one thing I found is when I was, like if my partner was taking me groups during the week and I took him to groups on the weekend, I was going to water baby, the baby swimming class. And that was really the only other interaction I got with the other dads more time. That and in the canteen at work as well, some other dads. So when COVID started in the groups where I would meet dads and babies, or also just canteen chat with other dads, when that stopped, that was quite challenging because then I was kind of just talking to my friends most of the time on like the lads chat, and none of them have children. So we spoke about working from home. They're like, "Oh yeah, working from home's great." I was like, okay, if you say so. I'm finding it really difficult, but I'm glad you find it okay. Or just like, oh, what you've been up to in lockdown? Oh yeah, I've been baking, been learning this new skill, been learning this new skill. It's like, yeah, I've been just trying to manage Corin when he's been like really upset, and I can take him out a walk, but it's especially during the winter, it's raining, it's wet, it's cold. It's like, well, I can't even take him anywhere. Just before lockdown, I would take him to the library really late at night until we got kicked out. Whereas I couldn't do that, so it's like, well, I'm in the house with the baby and my partner all the time. So yeah, it's great that you guys are learning or like getting high scores on World of Warcraft. But my life's very different, and I don't have anyone really I can talk to about it. Now that we're allowed to socially distance, meet up with the parents again, I've met another dad that I know from uni a couple of times and stuff. And then one friend who has a nephew that he sees quite a lot, extended households and stuff. And that's fine. But I found it really difficult not being able to meet other new parents. And it was just, I felt completely cut off. And there was no one I could really identify with. And that was a big struggle for me. Because then it was like, oh, okay, is it just me that's experiencing these parenting issues, or is it everyone else? I've since found out everyone else, but for a while I didn't know that, and it really affected me mentally.
Yeah, Mike?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I totally appreciate what you're saying there, John. I mean, from my perspective, because my son's quite a bit older, he turned 8, this week. What I've found really difficult is with all the homeschooling that we've had to do. We've had to turn ourselves from being just fathers and mothers to now to almost teachers and so forth, and it's really tricky when you suffer with or you struggle with things like maths or reading or whatever, and you're making sure that you're doing it in their way, because when I went to school it might be in one way and now it's changed and it's a different way, and you think, am I doing this right? And then you've got, my son who's just like doesn't want to do it, and then you're having to drill into them to do that, and then you're feeling anxious that it's going to come back and the work's not right and everything. But I suppose in that situation, obviously the kids are back at school now here in the UK, so that's taken a lot of weight off a lot of parents' minds. But it was also so difficult, because it's just like, well, how do you do it? You're trying to do the work yourself and understand them, and you can't. So, but again, the support has been there, but it's a lot more easier now that the kids are back at school and they're being taught the proper way in the classrooms and so forth. So, yeah, it's hopefully things are going to start lifting soon.
There's definitely a lot of pressure there, like you were saying, Mike, because back when we were at school, things were very different, but also we struggled to learn certain things anyway. We struggled with taking in new information. It's almost like we're having to do that all over again, but also teach that to a young person who may also be struggling with those things. So I can definitely empathize with how difficult that is.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add, actually, that schools are really not only about education, isn't it? There's a lot really that children of all ages have missed out on. because it's about as well them learning social skills, self-care skills, all sorts of different things. And, us as parents needing that break, needing, to have time, to kind of have work as a separate thing, and, not having to do the school homeschooling or doing the homeschooling and doing the work later on, when you're supposed to be resting. I mean, you're supposed to, the bed, normally you would have been resting, that sort of side of things. So my son, he's a teenager, so I'm lucky in that sense that he can get on with his work by himself, or kind of, he's doing A level, so the level of his physics and chemistry, I wouldn't be able to do it myself. But I think I struggle with trying to get him out to get some exercise, just to leave the home, because I think I know that him and his peers have been really demotivated, like like us as parents as well, just sometimes struggling, to get out of bed, thinking, oh my goodness, again, how am I going to do this? That sort of, feeling, yeah, without the lack of face-to-face contact.
And I think that as well, you're saying about transitions and things like that. So even though we're on the other side of the world, we've only just been able to go back onto school property. So John was saying about canteen dads and things like that. Our play group started literally last week. And we're allowed back on site for canteen and to buy uniforms from the uniform shop again. So yay! But even then, they're keeping some of the protocols. So at my daughter's school, we don't go on site for morning pick up and drop off. So we have to stay outside the gate. They've found that the kids are going into school much more independent and much more level-headed during the morning. So, but from my experience, I had one child who was going into school and transitioning from preschool to primary school, and one child who was transitioning from high school out, and the lack of learning support for my older child was a big issue. And I know that a lot of other parents and other people had that issue, especially for crucial things like year 11 and year 12. So that lack of support has done a number to a lot of kids that haven't, and we as parents were expected to carry the load of SEND teachers and of all the different, teachers are qualified for 4 years, have to study to be an educator, and to expect parents to take that on so readily and so quickly. And on top of that, for us being dyspraxic, then having to teach us as dyspraxic people, we don't have that extra education. Well, most of us don't. So it was really unfair, and we all need to give ourselves much more credit for that, because it's such a difficult thing to take on board and run with during a time that we were all already traumatized and acting on anxieties and panic and fear. So we should be much more proud about what we've achieved. But I just want to go back to what John was saying about the parenting thing with dad groups and things like that. So my husband's stay-at-home dad. There is nothing out here in regional Australia for stay-at-home dads to socialise. He's autistic as well, so struggles with that as well. And it sucks. So for us, it was already isolating before COVID hit. And the rest of the world got an idea of what we go through in terms of our regular disabled parent isolation, and the changes that have come from that. So, things like online delivery, contactless for groceries and food drops. Could we just keep that? There are lots of things in the comment people talking about with COVID, the fact that they only go out when they're walking their dogs and things like that. Yeah, I'm not actually upset too much. My neighbours are weird. And, I didn't have to deal with that for a little bit. It was great. And so there are a lot of upsides. Masks do suck. But when you're sick, and I go to university, and I used to joke that I'd sit at the back and cough over everyone just so I get better marks. I feel like a dick now. But, you learn, maybe now in future I'll wear a mask. And so we have learnt things from this, and I hope that the experience that neurotypical parents got of being in the shoes of disabled and isolated parents, regardless of whether you're disabled or not, parenting is isolating. I hope that people have a greater understanding and compassion towards each other, and that the changes that and especially things that have taken away the barriers of ableism, if that can continue going forward from this, I can only see benefits.
Absolutely. One of the things that, so along with having dyspraxia, autism and ADHD, I do have other disabilities as well that affect me physically. So I also have POTS syndrome and vasovagal syncope. So I might pass out if I stand up for too long. So at the very beginning of lockdown, we had to queue for everything. And if I went to the front of the queue and said, I'll pass out if I stand too long, can I come in? Everyone hates you. Like the whole queue, you can just feel their stares like digging right through you. But a lot of the time I was refused because it was, well, you're standing now, so you're fine. But as well, like having that kind of sensory overload as well. And when I first went into shops, I was having lots and lots of panic attacks because I was hearing over the tannoy it was due to COVID. There's restrictions on the number of items that you can buy. There's restrictions on toilet paper, of all things. Like those things made me really, really anxious. And those things make me quite anxious anyway. Because of my dyspraxia, I'm always bumping into things. So I always have someone with me. My memory is shocking.
Stupid arrows.
Like, yeah, it's just like I have allergies as well. So, well, I say allergies. I can't have gluten and dairy because, you know, apologies to anyone who's near me when I do. So I have to check the labels of everything. And things change. So I may have bought this one thing 100 times over, but I still have to check this label. And obviously at the beginning, no one wanted to come anywhere near one another, whereas now no one cares. But I had people shouting at me. I had people trying to get me kicked out because I was taking too long choosing things. And I ended up really isolating myself. And the only time I was leaving the house, like many people in the comments have said, was just to go shopping. And it was really upsetting to hear people saying, my gosh, I wouldn't want to live a life where I only left the house once. Whereas that's really ableist because there are so many disabled people, that is their reality. And we had supermarkets taken away the disabled spaces so that they could put queuing up. That breaks so many laws. But refusing people to have access because of disabilities, people forget that being in a wheelchair isn't the only thing that makes someone disabled. And with the sunflower lanyards as well, so I have a sunflower lanyard. I do wear a mask. I've had people shout at me before I've even gone into a shop saying that you should be wearing a mask. It's like I'm outside. Haven't gone near a shop yet and my mask is in my pocket. Like there is so much judgment, and I find that COVID has definitely heightened that. But then there's the positive side, like Danielle said, where you've got click and collect. We now have food services where you can buy services from people without having to interact with people, not actually having to have someone come to your door. They can leave it there, they ring the bell. Like if you have anxiety, which a large number of people do, you don't want to interact with those people. You want to be able to just kind of grab and collect. And it's those services that have become so important for disabled people, because these are things that should have been put in place many, many years ago. But now because of COVID, those things have had to come into place. And for some of us, it's been a godsend. Like for some children, being able to work from home, at least for the first bit of it, not so much now. So I've got younger brothers, and one of them has quite severe anxiety and he gets frustrated quite easily. Being at home meant he was more comfortable. He didn't have that kind of, I have to do this by this time. And so his anxieties were just massively lifted. Now he's frustrated because he wants to see his friends and he can't. So there is obviously the downside of that. But there are so many positive things we have seen from COVID and services that we can only hope will continue. And other ones, not so much, like being forced to queue for an hour just so you can get your bread, milk and all those things I'm not meant to be eating.
It is a little bit better over here. We don't have to queue for that kind of stuff anymore, thank goodness. But for example, going to school, I've got a child who's been off school for a week sick, has to have a COVID swab. Yep, we've got no COVID in the community, but still needs to have a negative COVID swab. And I like it because I know that my children are going to school and not picking up 5 million head colds and germs from other kids, because other kids have to stay home. So there have been some benefits through that, you know, just in that awareness of hygiene and things like that too, which is only going to benefit us as a society as well. But also I've got 2 young children who now know to hand sanitize when they walk into a door, walking past a door. And so there is, you know, for especially the younger generation, this could be what changes for some of us in terms of healthcare, and especially some of the ones in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to look to the comments now to see if there's any questions in here. As I mentioned earlier, if there's a question you'd like to pop on, if it will literally just bring it on the screen. So I'm just going to go through now. So bear with me while I skim read, which I'm really terrible at.
That's okay. While you're skim reading, I just want to answer a question from earlier there by Mr. Ux about baby wearing. The funny thing is that with baby wearing, if I wear high heels, normally I fall over on my face. You put a baby on my back and high heels on my feet, and I am as graceful as all hell. I don't know how. It's this random thing with, and I think with Dyspraxics, we get really good at some skills, the muscle memory. And one of the things with being a parent with Dyspraxia is muscle memory is so very important when it comes to changing nappies. You do it in the middle of the night without looking. Realistically, like everyone says, I need light for the, no, you don't. You do it in the dark. You know what you're feeling for, you know what you're looking for after a while. And so muscle memory, so I've got 5 years between my middle and my youngest. I put my baby on my back the other day with no problems. As long as my wrist isn't too sore. So, because I fall over a lot, so I jar my wrist a fair bit. So that's where I struggle with baby wearing. And so I have like carriers and things like that I can use as well. But that trick of being able to get her on my back and things like that, I haven't lost it. And, you know, just like I say, riding a bike, all those skills that we work really hard on to retain as dyspraxic people, to keep, if you keep at it, no matter what in parenting, whether that's crocheting your baby's blanket, whether that's knitting a hat, it might be weaving a mat or something like that to go on the baby's floor. You can do creative things and be hands-on in ways that are meaningful and still be dyspraxic, because it's still meaningful no matter what to the kids and to yourself, and that connection is what parenthood is very much about. So
yeah,
definitely
sorry, my partner and I also baby wear, but I don't do the actual wrapping. If any, on the rare occasion he's ever been wrapped on me, it's my partner that does it, and I make sure that she looks at it every minute to make sure I'm undone, and I'll go out with her if it is wrapped, because I know if it becomes undone I will not be able to fix it. But if you want to baby carry, one thing I find is good is getting a baby Bjorn carrier, so it's like buckles and clips, and it's much easier than I think maintaining a wrap. But I find that personally. So I used to take my son out in the baby Bjorn all the time, and I find that I'd actually, you know, I've never tripped. I've never come close to tripping. I'm not sure what it is about having the baby on you. I think it just focuses you more. I think a lot of the time, if I've ever bumped into doors, there was one time at work. I bumped into a door like 3 different times in one day, but it's because I was always thinking about something else, or I was rushing between places. You know, just that executive function thing. Whereas when you have a child strapped to you, it focuses your mind tremendously, and then you're thinking, he's on my chest, I'm going to walk down the stairs, and I'm walking along, and you don't let anything else distract you. It's actually a very good tool for not getting distracted, is having a young child strapped to you, I think.
Have a baby attached.
So I wouldn't worry about it. Get a baby Bjorn.
So I have a carrier which I just showed up on the screen, and I'm trying to find a picture because I was actually heavily pregnant with still baby wear, and it works for so many things. These little wraps are great because it regulates you. So I like tight compression. I know some other people like, weighted blankets and things like that. So the carriers and weighted and those kind of things give you that reassurance that you're hugging the baby and that it's close to you, which increases your oxytocin, helps you when you're breastfeeding. Oxytocin is an amazing love drug. And so the closer you have the baby to you and the safer it is on you will matter long term to your mental health and to the baby's connection to you as well. So it's baby wearing has many, many benefits, and I could sit here and talk for hours on that, but I won't bore you all.
Next time.
Wonderful. Okay, right. I think we will leave it here. Or did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just seeing the question from Dyspraxic Help for You. What were the panel eagerly anticipating and fearing the most ahead of parenting? Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, that's the way to do it.
There you go. 8 months pregnant and with a 5-year-old on my back.
Oh, bless you. I mean, for myself, I think the fear, and it's a weird one about like public transport, where you've got a buggy and it's like you can only get so many buggies or prams on the bus, and it's like, am I going to have to fold this down and hold on to my baby and fold all this pushchair down? I mean, it's a free-wheeled kind of all-terrain pushchair that we had, so it was okay, but it's just like, is it if I've got to be somewhere on time and there's already 2 buggies on the bus, what's going to happen? Am I going to have to say no and get the next bus? Am I going to have to try and pack it down on my own? So it was really tricky. So really, in answer to that question, it was just like public transport, what was going to happen before I was actually going to get there. So that was, I don't know if anybody else on the panel have that anxiety about that as well.
Yes. Yep. I that's why I moved to baby wearing, because I'm not very exactly the front of a stroller or pram buggy. I tend to forget where it is, and I run into stuff with the pram as well. And I don't like looking like I'm trying to run a demolition derby with my baby. So that's why I moved to carriers, because I found that if I'm going to bump stuff, at least I can put my arms around her while I've got her on front.
Yeah, I've found that sometimes judging space with the pram.
Yeah.
There was one time at Waterstones, I accidentally ran into this guy. He was a little bit in front of me. It was just before the pandemic, and I was like navigating through. And he was a little bit in front, and then I ended up going like this, and I was like, "Oh, is that guy okay?" And he turned around and looked at me like, "Mate, you just rammed into me with your baby," and I was like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realise. I thought I'd left plenty of space, but I didn't. I just rammed him with a pram." And his back.
Classic
so
dyspraxic depth perception.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened there. So I think if you're in a tight space, if you don't want to be in a shop that's like, especially Waterstone, sometimes it can be quite narrow going around the book display tables, then ideally that's where baby carrying probably comes in really handy as a person.
I've got this one.
Yeah.
So on difficult dyspraxic days, we all have them. I am lucky that I've learned through experience to prepare for them in advance. So I don't buy vegetables that I have to chop up. So I'll buy frozen, pre-chopped vegetables, those zucchini spirals, cauliflower rice, all that kind of stuff that's pre-processed. Probably all in my freezer. They're all snap fried, so they're all healthy, but I just am not going to bother with that. Same as microwave snap frozen vegetables. You can put them, you still got to eat healthy. We eat healthy. So it's about knowing the shortcuts that can get you through. So I know that if I just microwave one of those veggie packs, make the kids some 2-minute noodles and fry some steak or something, there's dinner. And the kids are fed, and at the end of the day, all the kids want to do is be fed, be exercised, and then slept. And as long as you hit your markers every day of, okay, the kids have been fed, the kids have had a bit of exercise, the kids have slept, you rinse and repeat. And some days are better than others. Some days you're operating on no sleep. That's been my reality for the last 12 months. And you have to learn to make the shortcuts, and again, managing expectations. I don't expect on bad dyspraxic days that I'm going to clean the house. I don't expect that the kids are going to leave toys out of the walkway. I know I'm going to be spending my day tripping over things as I walk through the doorway. Can I do something about it? Maybe. Do I want to? no, not right now. And just it's you look every battle that you come up to, you just look at it and go, is this worth my time? Is this worth being upset at? And a lot of the times you just have to let it go, because otherwise you're going to get more stressed about life and everything else, and it puts you in a worse mood. But it's just all about shortcuts, and having kids who are dyspraxic as well, being able to teach them how to handle those days is really important. They've got to see the bad days. And that's one of my big things with parenting is big moods, bad days, bad moods. Kids have to see and experience all of those, because it's our job to teach them how to regulate that. So we can't teach them how to cope with, a day where my hands aren't going to listen to my brain. So this morning I was dropping everything, and my kids already knew that by this afternoon they're probably going to have to help me cut up dinner tonight. But that means that we're probably going to have pizza. So they get to make their own pizzas. There's trade-offs, and it's when you get to a point with your kids that you get into a groove, and I think it comes from being truthful and honest about your abilities. Your kids feel like they can also trust you, and that's so important. And with your partners and everything else, and it's about making changes. So using that cauliflower rice means that my husband needs to make changes instead of using the big chunky cauliflower that he's used to cooking. Yeah. So we all just accept and adapt to each other in the hopes that the kids will then be encouraged to accept and adapt when they become us as parents.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with that. And then the point about picking your battles, I think the actual specific example is if you can't tie their shoelaces, I think the best way to do that is just don't have shoelaces. And I know sometimes that's difficult, so I can, as an adult, I like tie my own shoelaces, but I got easy laces, which is this thing here. And you actually take the laces out of your boots and just replace them with these, and then it basically turns any type of shoe into like a slip-on. So if you're comfortable doing that to your own child or yourself as an adult, in that way, instead of having to struggle with the child's laces and they're getting upset, it's like, well, if you've got the same sort of laces as dad, then they're just plastic, stretchy laces, and then you sort them easily. And so you're just taking out the difficulty in your life. That preparation is the key to winning the battles. So
just like taking
I think as well.
Yeah,
and that radically, you can change the rule books on parenting. You're not limited to you must eat with a knife and fork. We have a lot of meal nights where we eat with our hands, because I'm not going to sit at the table and make a fool of myself trying to eat with a knife and fork in front of the kids and show them bad manners, show them how not to eat, when instead we could eat an Indonesian meal that involves using our hands to eat. So the kids are learning about other cultures. Kids are learning about how to use their dexterity and things like that are more important than learning and it's about rewriting that book. And I think as neurodivergent parents, we tend to rewrite a lot of books on things like that. One of them is I use adaptive knives and forks, so mine are all chunky and knobbly, and I don't want the kids to see that as any different. So everybody in the house has their own set and color, because we're not going to discriminate against me having some and everybody else. So everyone's just got their own set. And we get a good opportunity to rewrite the book on how to parent dyspraxia, and also to parent us, and we've got to reparent ourselves in a lot of situations too, because we want to do a good job. We want to raise our children the way that we want to be raised.
Yeah. Absolutely, that is very perfectly well said. Wonderful. Okay, so we are 20 minutes over our original top time, but that's fine. We just have so much to talk about, and there is 100 million things more that we could talk on this topic. So this video will still be live, and the questions that people have put into the chat will be in live as well. So thank you very much for coming and being on the panel, and thank you to everyone who has come and watched and sent questions in. So yeah, I will leave it there. Thank you all very much for coming, and we will say goodbye now. Bye. Bye.